This is the case of JonBenét Ramsey, a 6-year-old child who was discovered dead in her family's home back in 1996. This case is one of the most famous unresolved cases in American history, and it still attracts a lot of public attention to this day. But before we begin, I need to warn you that this video contains potentially triggering material. Viewer discretion is advised. In December of 1996, the police in Boulder, Colorado were called to a private residence in the middle of the night. A man who lived at the house had just called 911 to report that his daughter had gone missing. The girl's name was JonBenét Ramsey, and she was only 6 years old. When they arrived, officers began to search for the girl, but they couldn't find her anywhere. They also noticed signs that someone had broken into the home. But this was Sunday, December, and the cops didn't know if little JonBenét had been kidnapped or if she'd simply run away from home. So they continued searching for her through the night without any success. The next morning, the FBI got involved. By this time, they had a team of over 200 men and women looking for JonBenét all across Colorado, but there was still no sign of the girl. It wasn't until 4 days later that they finally found out what happened to her. On December, John and Patsy Ramsey went downstairs in their house to get ready for work. There the kids, JonBenét and her older brother Burke, should have been asleep in their bedrooms, but when they checked, both of the kids were gone. It seemed like Burke had climbed out of his window, but the window was shut from the inside. On top of that, JonBenét's bedsheets had been pulled off, making it clear that she hadn't slept in her own bed that night. At first, John and Patsy thought that maybe Burke had somehow opened the window from the inside and taken his sister with him, but after looking around, they realized that this wasn't the case. The parents were now worried, so they checked their kids' closets. And this is when they made the horrific discovery that JonBenét was nowhere to be found. They knew that something was wrong, so John called the police and told them that his daughter was missing. When the cops arrived, they found signs of a struggle in JonBenét's room and some blood. This indicated that she may have been kidnapped, but they never did figure out if this was the case or not. You see, her body wasn't found until a whole week later, so the police had absolutely no idea what had happened to her during that time. A ransom note was left behind in the house, but it was quite strange. In the note, JonBenét was referred to as a little princess. It said that the kidnappers wanted $118,000 in exchange for her safe return. Whoever wrote the letter knew about her beauty pageants, and they also seemed to know a lot about the Ramsey family. The note was written on a paper that was torn from a notepad that belonged to John, but DNA testing later showed that the paper had been contaminated, so it wasn't much help to the investigators. Her parents immediately became suspects in the case, but they passed a lie detector test. However, many people still think that they were hiding something. There was one thing in particular that set off alarm bells for the police. During the early hours of the investigation, Patsy Ramsey told the press that she believed JonBenét had been kidnapped. But a couple of days later, she changed her story. She said that JonBenét had definitely not been kidnapped, but she refused to elaborate on this. She just kept insisting that whoever had done this to her daughter had done it in their home. At this point, the media started attacking the Ramseys, calling them uncooperative and whatnot, so they decided to hire a lawyer and stop talking to the press. Even though they had nothing to do with the murder, this didn't look good for them. People thought that they were hiding something. However, they did cooperate with the police, even letting them search their house several times. Then, in January of 1997, 7 weeks after JonBenét was found dead, they agreed to take a polygraph test together as a family. They both passed, proving that neither of them had killed their daughter. But even though they were cleared in the eyes of the public, the police were never convinced. They continued investigating the Ramseys, but they never found any evidence that they were involved in their daughter's death. And then things took a really bizarre turn. 3 months after the tragic death of JonBenét, the police received an anonymous tip. The caller said that he was the one who had killed JonBenét, but he didn't give the cops his name, so they couldn't arrest him. He said that he was a handyman who had recently moved to the area. But when the cops checked with local businesses, they found out that he wasn't working as a handyman. He was actually working at a Burger King. To make things even weirder, another person came forward and claimed that he had seen JonBenét being kidnapped. He said that he had been driving past the Ramsey house when he saw John carrying JonBenét out of the house and putting her in the back of a white van. But when the police asked him why he hadn't reported this earlier, he said that he had been afraid to come forward because he didn't want to get involved. What was the police supposed to do? He obviously wasn't going to identify himself, so they couldn't bring him in for questioning. And even if he had wanted to come forward, how could they prove anything? He had seen the kidnapping a week before it happened, so everything could have been completely different by the time the cops arrived on the scene. It's possible that this guy just wanted to be part of a high-profile case, but I don't know. Maybe he actually did see the kidnapping. Who knows? In the meantime, the police searched for answers. It wasn't until 3 years after the murder that they finally found a breakthrough. Some fibers from JonBenét's clothes matched fibers from an unknown source. This was exciting, but they needed more evidence to make an arrest. By now, the Ramsey family had hired some pretty powerful lawyers and they were getting sued left and right. The media was still constantly hounding them, and it looked like the whole country hated them. After 5 years, they finally decided to leave Colorado and move to Georgia. And then the strangest thing happened. In 2008, John Ramsey's computer was hacked, and the hacker demanded that he hand over his floppy disk. Turns out the floppy disk contained some very important evidence in the case. But instead of giving the disk over, John destroyed it, which led to more speculation that he was guilty. It wasn't until 2013 that the case saw any movement. DNA found under JonBenét's fingernails turned out to be male DNA, meaning that the killer wasn't a stranger. This gave the police new hope that they could finally solve this case once and for all. But it also meant that the police had been focusing on the wrong thing all along. Instead of looking for a stranger, they should have been asking the people closest to JonBenét if they knew who could have done this. They started by re-interviewing the people who had been close to the Ramsey family. One of those people was the personal assistant of Patsy. Her name was Linda Arndt, and she told the police that she had seen Burke acting strangely the morning that JonBenét was found dead. He had scratches on his neck, and he had blood on his clothes. When Linda asked him what had happened, he just stared at her. Then he washed his clothes in cold water and hung them up to dry. Linda figured that he must have been playing and hurt himself. She also said that Burke had recently become obsessed with a book about the occult. Linda had lent it to him. The title of the book was The Satan Seller, but when she asked him why he was reading such a dark book, he just shrugged. This was the first time anyone had ever mentioned that Burke had shown any interest in satanic stuff, and it raised a lot of red flags. Was he trying to cover up his crime? Did he kill his sister in a satanic ritual? Linda also told the police that Burke and John had a somewhat strained relationship. Burke always felt that his father was comparing him to JonBenét, which caused him to feel inferior. Could Burke have snapped and killed his sister? As Linda was telling the police all this, they were watching Burke being interviewed as well, and they noticed something strange. Every time Burke talked about his sister, he seemed completely detached. He didn't show any emotion whatsoever. This suggested that he might indeed be guilty, but it also suggested that he could have witnessed something traumatic, like seeing his sister get murdered by their father. If John Ramsey killed JonBenét, would Burke really be able to live with that knowledge forever? If so, he must have been incredibly traumatized that night. But let's be honest here, none of us were there, so we can't know what actually happened. We can only speculate. As of today, the case remains officially unsolved, but it looks like Burke and John are the most likely suspects. Personally, I think that they should dig up the grave and search for evidence that can link Burke to the murder. DNA technology has improved a lot since 1996, so it's worth a shot. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.